When Green Day released Dookie in 1994, they had no idea their lives would change forever. It not only brought them international fame and fortune, it helped to popularize pop punk for the rest of the 90s and into the early 2000s. And while the recording itself was without conflict, the events that led up to the album's creation, as well as its slow build to massive success, is where our story lies. On today's program, we're going to discover how Green Day made Dookie. Today's episode is brought to you by Manscaped. When Green Day played Woodstock 94, they left the stage covered in mud, and if Manscaped's new Ultra Premium collection was around back then, I think they would have used it, because Manscaped's not just about down their care. They now have a whole shower routine to keep you looking and smelling your best, from moisturizing body wash to time-saving 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner to my favorite, aluminum-free deodorant. And even better, they updated their flagship model. This is the Lawnmower 4.0. It's still got that skin-safe tech, it's waterproof and the battery lasts up to 90 minutes, but now it's got a lock feature. So no more running out of battery power by accident in case it gets bumped during travel, and I've had that happen to me, but you can save yourself that trouble. Right now you can help support the channel and get 20% off plus free shipping with the code VINYLREWIND at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping. Just follow the link below and use the code VINYLREWIND at checkout. Our story begins towards the end of 1990 when Trey Cool replaced Green Day's original drummer. They then spent much of the following year playing any show they could, whether it was at a legitimate venue or to a dozen people at someone's backyard barbecue. It didn't matter to them, but what they were building was more important. Not only were they getting better as a band since Trey was a stronger drummer, they were also building a following that extended past the regular punk crowd. Their sound was reaching a broader audience, which would become vital in the next few years. By May of 1991, they started recording their second album, Kerplunk, but after 6 songs, they ran out of material and went back on the road. By September, they returned to the studio and finished the album for a reported cost of $2,000. By late October, they left for their first tour of Europe and spent the next 3 months traveling from country to country. Overall, this tour proved to be vital to their later success because the experience brought them closer as a band and as friends. They relied on each other like never before, and they became a better band because of it. On the 17th of December, Kerplunk was released, and it blew away all expectations as it sold 10,000 copies its first day and went on to sell at least another 20,000 by the end of 1992. According to the founder of Lookout Records, Larry Livermore, he said that the label's best-selling album before Kerplunk was Operation Ivy's debut, which had taken a whole year to sell its first 2,000. Much of Kerplunk's success came from word-of-mouth recommendations, college radio, and of course Green Day's relentless touring schedule. But as their popularity increased, the band was feeling more and more like they were outgrowing Lookout Records. Despite the album selling well, there were issues with distribution as some of their fans had a hard time finding the record. As bassist Mike Dirt said, "We were playing to more people than our records were getting to." Green Day felt they were ready to move to the next level, but they weren't sure what that was because, according to Billy Joe, they were adamantly against major labels at the time. It was all just watered down pop crap. And honestly, prior to the fall of 1991, the major record labels weren't interested in punk because it didn't sell well. But that all changed with the release of Nirvana's Nevermind. The album became an unexpected and massive success, resulting in the majors scrambling to sign the next Nirvana, and this put Green Day in their sights. Suddenly they found themselves being courted by A&R reps from all the major labels. For the most part, the band didn't take the meeting seriously and only saw it as a way to get a free meal. However, there was one rep who stood out from the rest. Rob Cavallo was a relatively new producer for Warner Brothers Records, and he was eager to make his mark within the company. He got a hold of Green Day's latest demo tape with Basket Case and Longview on it, and he was blown away. He loved the music and went up to meet them. For a corporate A&R guy, he was different. He got stoned with the band and jammed out in their basement practice room. Trey said, "Rob was like the only person we met that had anything to do with music. The band liked him because he was younger than most of the reps they met, and he knew how to play an instrument. On top of this, Billy Joe was impressed by Rob's work on the debut album by the Muffs." By February of 1993, Reprise Records offered them a record deal and the band was seriously considering it. When Larry Livermore found out about this, he tried to talk them out of it. He thought they should do one more indie record first to solidify their fan base and strengthen their bargaining position. In his mind, they could maybe hope to sell 100,000 copies of their next album, and that would be a huge success as an independent band. But on a major label, that would be seen as a failure. It's also important to keep in mind that at this time, Green Day had a pretty generous 60-40 revenue split with Lookout Records, and so John Ginoli of Pansy Division thought they would probably make more money selling 50,000 copies on Lookout than they would selling 500,000 copies on a major, so they might as well just stay with the indie. On top of this, accepting a major record deal meant that the band would lose all credibility within the underground punk scene. They would become sellouts, which I don't have to tell you is probably one of the worst things you could be labeled within the scene. If they failed to be successful, they probably wouldn't be welcome back. When Billy Joe recalled making the tough choice, he said, "One thing I was just sort of thinking about the whole time was what if. I was too curious. I felt like we had potential. I didn't know if it was potential for failure or potential to being the biggest band in the world. For me, it was never about money. It was about let's see how far we can take this." By April of 1993, Green Day were ready to sign a 5-album deal with Reprise Records and receive a $300,000 advance. But when staring at the contract, Billy Joe had reservations. "I was struggling so hard even to sign that effing contract. I was contemplating, should I just run out of here right now? Am I making the biggest mistake of my life?" In the end, he signed it, and news of Green Day selling out spread within the Bay Area scene. Jello Biafra from the Dead Kennedys said, "The entire underground scene was livid at Green Day, and deep down, their crime was being successful." The backlash towards the band really hurt them, but it was especially hard for Billy Joe. The Gilman Street scene had a huge impact on himself and his outlook on the world. He felt part of a larger community. He worked security for the Gilman venue, stayed after hours to clean up, and Green Day got their start there. And now the community were turning their backs on him and the band. The damage was done and there was no turning back now. Green Day pulled their focus towards writing new and better material. It was as if the stakes were raised and they wanted to prove that they could succeed as a major label band. Billy Joe said, "We kind of evolved. There was something that happened to us when we signed to a major label. I became really focused on the songwriting. All the major label bands that came from punk rock had sort of failed on major labels, so it became a real gamble." The band chose to record Dookie at Fantasy Studios in Berkeley, which was an ideal location since they didn't own cars and they could bike there from their house. The bulk of the album took roughly 3 weeks to record during the month of August, with an additional recording session taking place in October. Rob Cavallo came on to co-produce alongside Green Day. His goal was to capture how the band sounded live and for them to sound like the best version of themselves. Billy Joe shared this vision as he said, "We wanted our record to reflect who we were as a band. You know, a $500 recording, that style, and put it on a big budget with more time to get bigger sounds." And I think you can really hear how successful they were in achieving this when you compare the two versions of Welcome to Paradise from Kerplunk and Dookie. The recording experience also proved to be very educational for the band. Their previous efforts in the studio only lasted a couple of days. They were in and out and back on the road, but here they were spending up to 12 hours a day for 3 or 4 weeks. Mike recalled it was a total learning experience. It was like we were going to college every day. Overall, recording was a relatively drama-free and sober process for the band. They came in with their songs well rehearsed and had very few, if any, guests hanging out during the sessions. Besides the 15 tracks that made it onto the album, 3 more songs were recorded and released as B-sides. The album was recorded onto 24-track analog tape with very little overdubs or fancy production. It really was a polished live sound. Looking back, engineer Neil King said that we kind of introduced that produced punk sound. It was still punk, but obviously you'd spend a little more time working on it. I think everybody after that copied that, you know, Blink-182 and all those bands. Almost as soon as they finished recording, Green Day was back on the road, this time opening for Bad Religion on the North American leg of their Recipe for Hate tour. While they were gone, Neil King spent a couple weeks mixing the album. Initially, the band didn't want any reverb. Billy Joe said, "We just wanted it to sound really dry, the same way the Sex Pistols or the early Black Sabbath records sounded." But when they finally heard this mix, it felt a little flat, like something was missing. Rob Cavallo agreed, and towards the end of October, they got Jerry Finn to remix the album. Also during this time, they re-recorded Longview because they felt it had gotten so much better after playing it for a couple of months on the road. It was also in October when the band met with Warner Bros. Records marketing director in LA to talk about the album art. Warner Bros. Wanted a photo of the band to be the cover, but Green Day had other plans. Billy Joe reached out to Bay Area artist Richie Booker to draw the cover. His only direction was the album title, Dookie. Supposedly, the original title was going to be Liquid Dookie, the term Green Day affectionately used when they would often get diarrhea on tour from not eating the freshest meals or the best food. Eventually, they shortened it to Dookie, and Richie just drew all the poop-related things he could think of, as well as making it a tribute to Berkeley itself. After the cover was finalized, Warner Bros. Asked him to make a poster version for advertisements, and so he added additional artwork on the bottom. Moving on to the booklet, the lettering and illustrations were done by Patrick Hines, who also worked on their previous albums. I think he does a great job weaving the themes of the album with the Bay Area urban environment, and even includes a bit of a through line with recurring characters. Unfortunately, most of these little vignettes are missing from the vinyl version, and I think that's a disservice because I feel they really add to the atmosphere of the album. The back cover is a photo from a 1993 New York concert where they opened for Bad Religion. Originally, it featured the Sesame Street character Ernie, but he was airbrushed out from later pressings. It was rumored that the removal was over fears of litigation, but according to Billy Joe, it was because a grandma bought the CD for her grandkids thinking it was a children's album, and they wanted to avoid further confusion. Dookie was released on the 1st of February 1994, and sales were slow at first, with the album only selling 9,000 copies its first week. Green Day was going to have to put in a lot of legwork to get this album out there. Their friends and family helped out by calling local radio stations to request the first single off the record, Longview. The accompanying music video was not only the first for the album, but also the first for Green Day. It was directed by Mark Core and was shot in the basement of the band's Berkeley home over a 2-day period. The video was simple due to the small budget, but the end result was effective in selling the band's image, and the video became quite popular on MTV when it was released towards the end of February. In retrospect, many sources claim that this video was a key component in Green Day's mainstream success. Then in early March, they released their next single, Welcome to Paradise, but there wasn't a fancy video to go with it. Instead, Reprise issued a video of a live performance cut to the studio recording of the song. And while this was hitting the airwaves, the band went back on the road, but this time they also made a few TV appearances, including a stop at Late Night with Conan O'Brien, The Jon Stewart Show, as well as MTV's 120 Minutes. By April, their hard work was paying off as album sales climbed to 65,000 units, and now their attention was put towards their next single and music video, Basket Case. Mark Core came back to direct, and he asked the band what they would like to do. Billy Joe suggested they shoot in an actual mental institution. Surprisingly, Mark was able to secure an empty wing of an abandoned one for their location. The video was shot on black and white 16mm film and later hand-colored to give it a surreal look. Although the single and video wouldn't be released until the end of August, Green Day continued to play concerts, building a slow but steady following. Green Day eventually joined the back half of the Lollapalooza festival, but it was their August appearance at Woodstock '94 that proved to be the turning point for the band. Playing the Woodstock gig was a tremendous opportunity for Green Day because not only were they going to perform in front of their largest crowd yet, there was a potential to reach millions more from the live pay-per-view broadcast of the festival. And there was also the opportunity for further promotion with the planned home video release and CD soundtrack. Green Day played on the last day in the afternoon. Heavy rains hit the outdoor festival the previous day and continued into Sunday, forming large mud pits. Their set kicked off with Welcome to Paradise, and after their second song, the band encouraged the crowd to throw mud at each other, but this of course prompted the crowd to start throwing mud at the stage. Then things got a little crazier when Billy Joe stuffed his face with some mud, but things were relatively calm other than the mosh pit and the occasional mud hitting the stage. By the time they played When I Come Around, the rain had increased and so had the frequency and accuracy of the mud clumps, sometimes even hitting the band. Some of the people in the crowd started to rush the stage. By the time Green Day got to what would effectively be the last song of their set, Paper Lanterns, the security crew had a tough time keeping order. After the guitar solo, Billie Joe took matters into his own hands and started throwing mud back into the crowd. Trey kept the beat going while Mike played his bass on the ground. And this goes on for another roughly 6 minutes before Billie Joe abruptly announces they're done, and a trove of concert goers rush the stage. In the ensuing frenzy, Mike was mistaken for one of them and he was tackled by security. His face hit the stage pretty hard, chipping his tooth in the process. But bruises aside, their appearance at Woodstock 94 stole the show. They walked away from that gig with press coverage you couldn't buy. The incident, more than anything, put them on the map, and sales of Dookie skyrocketed. The band's publicist said, literally the following Monday, the phone never stopped ringing. It was such a turning point. I remember watching the performance and thinking, oh my God, this changes everything. In less than a year, Green Day went from virtual unknowns playing in small clubs to becoming a headlining act and selling out arenas. Dookie's 5 singles were all over American rock radio, and MTV played their videos on repeat. Even sales of their previous 2 releases increased, both eventually reaching gold status. By 1995, Dookie peaked at the number 2 spot on the US Billboard charts, selling over 3.5 million copies, and they received a Grammy Award for Best Alternative Performance. In the end, Green Day didn't so much make Dookie as much as Dookie made Green Day into the band we know today. Alright everybody, that will do it for today. I want to thank you all so very much for watching and subscribing. We just crossed the 200,000 mark, which is incredible. Thank you all so very much for your support over the years. In the meantime, let me know your first experience with this album. I know for me it was, gosh, late 94, early 95. My friend had it on cassette and the cover just enthralled me because I loved Where's Waldo books growing up, and here was a poop-filled version of it. It just cracked me up. But then when he hit play, I was immediately enthralled with the music. It just resonated with me, and it really set me down this path. This, along with Weezer's Blue Album, it set me down this path of discovering current music, because prior to that, I was really lost in classic rock, like 60s, 70s music, but after this point forward, I was really into what was current and watching MTV and checking out the music videos that went along with this. It was just a great time growing up, and so I have a lot of fond memories of this record. If you haven't already, be sure to check out my album review and my custom cocktail I created for this. Well, I co-created it with my wife. It's called the Gillian. It's on my other channel, Mixing with the Geek. And yeah, that should do it. Thank you again for watching. Thank you to my members over on Patreon. You guys really help me out every month. I am your Vinyl Geek, and I'll catch you on the flip side.